Hi, NAEA 2022. I'm super excited to be with y'all today. And I am going to be talking about choice-focused curriculums. I have an Art 1 curriculum totally ready for you to use. And I am very excited to share that with y'all. I hope that it's useful to you. But before we dive deep into that, I just want to introduce myself a little bit, give you a little background. My name is Brooke Bry, and I teach at Ponder High School. This is my first year in Ponder, and it has been super awesome. They are a small rural district. There's about 500 students at the high school. But before that, I taught in Bridgeport for about 12 years. So 6 years or so at the elementary and 6 at the high school. So I have been working with choice at both elementary and high school level for a fairly significant amount of time. And over the years, it just keeps changing and changing and changing. But I finally feel like I've got a grasp of something that I really am proud of and that I think could be really useful to others that are struggling with choice. So this presentation is certainly for people that are interested in choice and like doing it and have been doing it for a while. I hope that there's something that you can get out of it. But this curriculum is hopefully more helpful to those that are new to choice or have questions about it, don't know how to assess it or how to, just how to figure it all out. It's a very common sentiment to tell new choice teachers they're just going to have to figure out how to do it on their own, and it bugs me a little bit. It's hard, when you hear that, you're like, oh man, that sounds like really exhausting. And it can be really exciting to work with choice with your students, but after you've done it for a little while and you can get really exhausted. And so I'm hoping that by sharing this curriculum with you, that you can maybe get over that little hump of like, I really want to do this, but I'm really tired and I'm having a really hard time with this and trying to figure it all out. So hopefully it'll give you some background and just give you some resources to make it a little easier to, execute it in your classrooms. So I'm going to kick us over to the actual curriculum website. So I put everything onto a website for you. It's called plugandplaychoice.com. So if you'd like to follow along, feel free to jump over there with me. I'm going to switch over to my other screen and get that onto where you guys can see it. Okay. Here we are at plugandplaychoice.com. And before we start, I want to talk about why I call it plug and play. Back in the day, I used to work at GameStop, and when we'd have a grandmother or somebody come in, they knew that someone that they loved likes video games, but they didn't know what kind of system they had. They didn't know what an Xbox was, maybe, or they didn't know if they had a GameCube or a PlayStation. And yes, I'm dating myself with those systems. So when these people would come in, we would recommend that they buy one of these plug and play devices because it didn't matter what this kind of system they had, it didn't matter what their situation was. As long as they had a TV, they could just take this little joystick box and plug in the RCA cables right into the front of the TV, and then they could just suddenly be able to play video games. It was very easy and straightforward and simple. And so that's what I hope that this system will be for you. The ability to just take something out of this curriculum and plug it into your classroom and allow your students to access it and enact a choice-focused curriculum in your classroom. All right, so I think we're going to start with a tour. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the different sections that are available on the site. That way you know just kind of what's here and what's available, and then we'll take a look at some of the more detailed deep dive kind of stuff. Here on the main menu, you've just got a bit of an overview, and as you scroll to the bottom, it shows you all 4 sections. So there are the circuits, the manual, play, and upgrade. So the circuits, that section is all about why I do things the way I do them, all of the research that has backed up everything that I do. The manual is about best practices. It's like all the practical, logistical stuff. Play is where the actual curriculum is, so the things that you would actually give to your students. The upgrade section is all about the future. So now that I've created a curriculum for Art 1, what does it look like with Art 2, or maybe even with an AP program where the focus is on inquiry? Let's start with play. The circuits and the manual there's lots of great stuff in there, and I want to share it with you, but I want you to understand why it's there and what this whole thing is. So let's take a look at play. So here in the play section, you're going to find the specifications. Okay, so the way that this works, it's really you will be giving the students the content. You won't be standing in front of the class and giving it to them. It's going to be given to them for them to access in their time. And so ideally your students have one-to-one devices. They have Google accounts. They have the ability to take or upload photos, and YouTube is not blocked. Now, there are alternatives, suggestions for alternatives. There's a link for that right here. I've thought about how you could do it if I had no computer. I do have a student right now that he does not have a computer, and we're kind of coping. We're just coping with that. We've figured out a way to deal with it. If none of my students had computers, or we only had computers every once in a while, I've thought about what that might look like as well. And so you'll look in these suggestions for alternatives here and see if you can make it fit your situation if this is not your situation. There are 4 types of units in this curriculum. Okay, there's content units, passion projects, skill goals, and expression goals. I ultimately learned through various iterations of having students set goals for themselves and their learning that it was a lot to ask an Art 1 student to have them both develop a new skill and to express themselves. And, it's not too much to ask for all of them, but it's certainly too much to ask for some of them. So I've divided them up into 2 phases. And so the first semester is focused on content and skill goals, and then the second semester is content and expression goals. The passion projects are ultimately, they're buffer projects. So the curriculum is designed to be student-paced, which means that they can access it and complete it to some degree on their own time schedule, at their own pace. It's student-paced. If, of course, there's a limit to that, and, if you've got students taking advantage of that, then that's a whole other story. But there are plenty of times when I have a student that is like, they're done, and I have, 10 other students that are actually 3 or 4 days behind my timetable. So these passion projects, they're not so much passion projects for the student, because the student gets to choose their own goals 80% of the time. But these passion projects are for you. So whenever, you have that project that you really love and you want to do, this allows you to sort of put those in there. It's a totally stress-free, risk-free, no graded project that the kids can do. You can share some new things with them. And just have them do something that's a little extra and something fun. Hopefully it motivates students who are behind to not waste their time. If they need the time, then we want them to take it. But if they're, dawdling, then maybe they will pick up the pace a little bit and get their work done in a more timely manner in order to participate in these passion projects. So these drop down and explain what those things are. But the next thing on this page, and the bulk of what's here, is the scope and sequence. Now, I have been using the site the way that it is this year, trying to feel what it would be like for you guys to access the site and use it. And I have definitely skipped a unit or 2. I've flip-flopped a unit or 2 because there was a holiday or a bad weather day or something like that. So, of course, these things are flexible, but in general, this is the order that I recommend doing things in. All of the black units are content, so those are going to be more, I'm on my computer, or the kids are on their computer doing their thing, learning something new. And it's not that they aren't making anything, but they're probably not making a lot. They might be making some personal choices, but for the most part, those are learning moments. The green goals are skill goals, so they'll be focusing on learning a new skill. And then at the end of each of the grading periods, you have those passion projects to allow some students to catch up who may have gotten behind. In the 4th, 5th, and 6th 6 weeks, you've got those purple expression goals, still more content, although less content. We spend more time on goals in the second half of the year. And then there are some of those passion projects, one of which is very specific. And so each one of these is clickable. It tells you how many lessons are within each one. So this artistic expression unit has 7 lessons in it. Now, 7 lessons in general should mean 7 days. It does not always. For example, in a skill goal, let's take a look at one of those. Those are how we kind of start off. In a skill goal, the students start off by writing a goal. Okay, so they will have, there's this lesson right here, all they have to turn in is 1 sentence. Now, for some of them, it's hard to write that sentence, but for the most part, they can do it in about 15 minutes. If your classes are 30, 45 minutes, then they can do that one and probably one other one before they have to leave. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but in general, the number that is next to those units is how many lessons there are, and in general it means how many days. So let's take a look at the first skill goal. So within each of these units there is a set of slides that's all set in a set of Google slides, and each of these slides you can click through them and you can see what's in each of these slides. And then over here on the right it gives you the implementation notes. So 90% of them, maybe 100%, is to create a copy of the slides. And there's a link here that will allow you to create a copy of this set of slides. It's important that you create your own copy, one, because I need to have one that's uncorrupted by changes, and 2, you're probably going to make some changes. There might be a situation that you want them to turn it in a different way, or maybe you need to change a link, or you have something that you'd like to contribute to it that is different from what mine says. So you'll create your own copy, and then it also helps, like my district with our Google stuff, I can't share stuff that belongs to me personally with my students. I have to make a copy with my school account in order to share it with my students. So anyway, all of these things on the right you're going to do. So for this one, all you need to do is make a copy of the slides. You're going to add the translation link, which is on the beginning. I'm going to show y'all that. There's a little text box right here that just says, like, if you need to translate this into Spanish, then click the link, and the link will you're just going to add that link into for those slides, so that when the kids click on it, it takes them to Google Slides. When I embed these in Canvas, it does not allow them to copy and paste the text, which means that they can't put it into Google Translate. It also doesn't recognize it with a lot of the translation apps that they have on their Chromebooks. So if they want to translate something, or I've used it for students that don't read well, or don't write well, if I want them to be able to copy and paste something, like maybe there's a vocab word that they're supposed to put on their vocabulary page, I'll show them that link and tell them, like, here, you can copy and paste it. You don't have to type it yourself. So you'll add the translation link and then import slides into Learning Management System. So I use Canvas. The manual section has all sorts of information about the translation link and embedding things into your LMS and all of the technical stuff. So on this page, let's just take a look at what we've got. So first we look at talent and practice. What is the difference between those? What do those two words really mean? Looking at the types of skills that you want to have, the types of the mentality you want to have in order to achieve a goal. You then set your goal. So I have them choose from a list to begin with. You don't have to. It's just what I like to do, because at the beginning, sometimes they feel a little overwhelmed with a lot of other stuff, and so it's easier to give them a list to choose from. It also gives them some terms and some things to search that they wouldn't have known about otherwise. So they set their goal. And then they research. They research for a couple of days. First, they find some resources to learn about what that thing is. So, for example, if they chose cross contour, then on the resources day, they're going to be looking at, what is cross contour? What does that word mean? What is this thing that I've chosen to do? And then on the demonstration day, they're going to find a video or a step-by-step website, something that shows them something that they can practice. And then they will practice for 2 days. So they have 2 days of practice. It's very guided. It's very specific. They have to divide their paper into 4 sections, and they are forced to practice 4 times before they can move on to their final piece. That's something that I learned, again, with lots of trial and error, is that if you don't force them to practice, they typically don't. And when they don't realize, or they don't learn as much, and they don't make a connection between practicing and improving. And, it seems fairly common sense, but for the most part, they need to be shown it outright. I have practiced 4 times, and look, my 4th box is better than my 1st box. So those 2 practice days are key. And then I give them 2 studio days to create an artwork. Now, there's a content lesson early on that talks about what art is and that it's expression, and they're reminded here, but I'm not grading them on their expression. I'm only grading them on them following this process. So if they don't make something expressive, if they practiced drawing an apple 4 times with value, and then they drew a big apple on their final studio day piece, that's fine. It's okay. It's not super interesting, but we're really just focused on skill building here, so that down the road, when we start to expect them to express their thoughts, feelings, ideas, then they feel a little more confident in their ability to do that. So, and they don't have to they don't have to worry about skill building as much. They have some skills that they can use in order to express themselves. And then at the end, they have to mount their artwork and post about it onto their Google site. So all through this entire process, they're posting to their Google site. They post the practice, they post their studio days, they show the whole process. So let's actually take a look at a student example. Let's pull up one of their Google sites. So this is Cody's journal. Their digital portfolios are on Google Sites, and they have several pages, but this is just one of the several pages that they have. It's where most of their stuff is posted. All of their process, most of their assignments go onto these journal pages. And so you can see the different assignments that we did earlier on. We did some brainstorming, looking at inspiration, collaborating. Here's that first talent and practice assignment that we looked at. And then here's where he set his first goal. So his first goal was, I will learn line contour. He doesn't really know how to say that properly yet. So by the end of the goal, he probably will, because I will have talked to him about it. But on his first day, he wrote, I will learn contour in the next 5 days. And then he researched it. The practice assignment is one that doesn't require you to post to your site. They actually have to post to a Google form, the video or the demonstration that they found. So that's not on here. But then he's got his 4 practices and then his 2 studio days. Now, you can see on these 2 studio days, he forgot to take a progress photo on day 1, because day 1 and day 2 are identical. So that's another thing I would have talked to him about, making sure that he's taking those progress photos and not waiting until after he's done with something before he does both assignments. But he chose to draw his water bottle using contour line. And then here's his goal 2, which is the same process, just minus the talent and practice assignments at the beginning. His next goal was, I will learn tints and shades in 5 days. And so then he defined tints and shades. He wrote about some materials he was going to need, and then he started to practice. Now, I believe he lost one of his practices, and we talked about that. And so I just had him photograph what he had. But you can see he's practicing tints and shades here. And then he remembered to take his progress photo on day 1 and on day 2. So this is the whole process that they go through, except for that final post. When they're done with something, they post that on a different page. Here is the page where Cody has posted his finished artworks. So at the end of a goal, they mount their artwork on black paper. I have them create a label with their name, and basically a label that has this information on it. And when I get around to it, I get those printed, and then we glue those onto the paper along with their artwork. But for their site, when they get finished, they don't have that label just yet. So they mount their artwork, they write about their work, and they post their practice. And this really helps them to see, okay, I improved in this, and then I made something cool. And that really sort of cements that if I work at this, I can improve. And if I work at this, I can do well, which is something that I struggled with early on with some of my choice practices. The students didn't make that connection. And so by having them post it this way, it really helps them to see that their attempts at practice has made their work better than it would have been, because they can see their first and their last practice along with their final piece. Now that we've looked at a skill goal, let's look at an expression goal. So like I said, in the first semester, we focus on skill building. It helps them to learn the process so that it's a lot easier in terms of all of the steps and the assignments and all of those things, so that when it gets time for them to express their thoughts, feelings, and ideas, that's what they have to focus on. And they don't have to stress over the assignment itself, because they understand how the assignments work, and they get what the expectations are, and they have some skills that they can use. So let's take a look at goal 6, which is the first I will express goal. So we start off in the same way that we did before, which is to set their goal. But the previous unit was all about artistic expression, how artists express themselves, whether it be to express their cultural tradition, their faith, their feelings, they challenge conceptions, or they provoke thinking. And so if you have other thoughts on ways that artists express themselves that don't fit into these categories, then I would love to hear from you. These are the ones I could think of. And so in that previous unit, we looked at examples of those, and they reflected on each type. They had to respond to each type in some way, whether it be coming up with ideas of their own, or just sort of reflecting on what they learned in the lesson. So in this first one, they have to write a goal that starts with, I will express that something in 7 days. That right here is particularly important. I don't quite understand why it makes such a big difference. But it does. It makes a huge difference in them writing goals that are more specific, and it just makes it easier for them to figure out how to do that. So I highly recommend keeping that right here. In the artistic expression unit, they also looked at good art versus bad art. And it's not that, obviously we don't want them to feel badly about their art, but we do want to push them into that realm of expressing things more specifically or more personally, and not just, I like blank, so I'm going to draw a picture of it. And so we review that very quickly right here. And then they set their goal. So this first one, they set their goal, and then instead of the research and practice phases, which they of course can revisit if they know they need to research something or if they need to practice something, they can do those things. They just aren't in the assignments. They know that they have time, that these things are self-paced. So if they need to take the time to do those things, they can do them. But these planning phases are what we do instead. So I have them draw thumbnail sketches. We look at composition and how composition creates meaning, and et cetera, et cetera. And they draw thumbnail sketches. They draw thumbnail sketches for 2 days. And then they have 4 days for their studio work on their expression goals. So with the skill goals, they only had 2 days, because in general, most of them were really just focusing on those skills, and they weren't picking anything that was super meaningful to them. So for the most part, they were happy to just kind of like do the assignment and move on. With the expression goals, we want to make sure that I give them time in order to put the effort and the work into their artwork, so that they look as well as they can. So they have 4 studio days, and then their goal complete, where they post to that 21-22 page, where they have all their finished artworks. So let's take a look at a different Google site, a different student's portfolio. So I'll switch over to that. So this is Lillian's portfolio. Lillian is an exceptional artist, and she's very thoughtful and methodical about her work. She's one of those students that just happens to be in Art 1 because she hasn't taken Art 1 yet. So these are some other assignments that we did leading up to the artist expression unit and then her first expression goal. So you can see this is actually goal 4, which means that we must have skipped 2 goals at some point. We must have run out of time. So don't feel bad if you don't quite have enough time for all of the goals or all of the different units. Figure out what works for you in terms of what you assign to the students and what you don't, what you find is most important. So her first goal says, in my next artwork, I will express that we humans are no different from one another. Thus, we are all deserving of each other's respect. So she picked this picture. I don't think she drew it. Generally they pick a picture off the internet for right there. But you can see her planning stages. So she's got all of her thumbnail sketches, and then you can see her work progress from day 1 into day 2, day 3, and day 4. And you can see that she has started on her goal 5. In my next artwork, I will express that love is a fragile treasure in 7 days. And so here are her thumbnails for that. So the expression goals are near and dear to my heart, and I certainly would like to spend much more time on these, but it really is important for my art ones. I've learned, just that they really need that skill building and to really cement the process, because the process is the same all year long. So if you can really cement that process in with those skill goals where things are a little easier and the they're not having to think quite so hard, then when you do start to ask them to think harder and to really dig deep, that it's easier for them to do that because the process is no longer something they're having to spend a lot of mental energy on. So let's take a look. Let's go back to plug and play choice and take a look at the circuits and manual, and so you can see how all of this kind of plays together. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go back and look at the manual and the circuits one more time. So the manual, now that you kind of understand what a unit looks like, the manual is where you're going to find lots of answers to questions. So there is a section on best practices. This is really just about how you interact with the students as they're going through this process. So it's not about the technical aspects or how do I put this Google slide into Google Classroom or Canvas. It's, when a student is acting this way, how do I respond to that? And how do I present the classroom in a way that will get the best results? So trust is key. Routine is super important. The modeling the types of behaviors you want them to be doing. So in this little comic that I did, how do I get my block perfectly in the center of my paper? Let's see what your resources say. So instead of just telling them the answer, looking and seeing where is a resource that's going to answer that question for me, because I clearly need that information. If you are looking through their resources then with them and seeing, I can't find a resource that answers that question for you. And you know what? I do know how to do that. So I'll show you a way to do that. Or I don't actually know how to do that. Let's kind of try and figure something out, and I'll see if I can find a better resource for you in the future, since you're having such a hard time finding one. So just different ways of interacting with them, the different types of interactions that you want to have. So best practices is a little fun. It was fun for me to make because I made all these little comics to go along with it. The studio, how people set up their studio is always going to be different. There's just no way to get around that. We all have different spaces and we all have different materials. But I provided a few insights about how I set up my classroom, and provided you with some images and of the rooms on a nice tidy day, of course. But the studio space is not the most important thing. It's really about making sure the students understand how to engage with the space however you have it set up. And then the implementation is where you're going to have a lot of that technical stuff. So that translation link I mentioned earlier, how do I set that up? What's that for? Why is it there? How to force copy if you don't know how to make a Google Doc or a slide or a form. force the student to make a copy, then that information is there for you. And then there's further information about how uploading these slides into a learning management system, specifically Canvas, because that's what I have. So there's really specific details about Canvas, but it gives you tips that I think are transferable to other LMSs, such as Google Classroom. There's a bunch of information about how I grade, and this is like literal tips and tricks about how I grade stuff. There's a lot of assignments in here. You can see there's a lot of assignments, but most of them are very short and small. I'm just assessing one little thing, so it's very easy and quick to flip through and just grade them all really quickly. But I have some different tips and tricks on how to get that done in a timely manner without eating up all of your time, and how it can actually be beneficial to be grading everything that they do on a daily basis, because it really keeps you up to date on what each student is working on, and when they get off track, and when you can step in to help them out. And then there's some digital portfolios, information about Google Sites and how I set those up, and how those are beneficial to the students as well as to you. So the manual section is all about the practical. The circuits section is all about the theoretical and all about the research and everything that backs up everything that we do. So if you are struggling to justify a choice-focused curriculum in your school, or are trying to get some folks to buy in, this section might be for you. If you're just really, you're interested in some of this stuff. I totally nerded out on this self-determination theory. I'd never read about that before, but once I came across that, I realized how well it actually meshes with choice-focused curriculums, and so this was really interesting to me. So maybe some of you might just want to really, dive deep into the research and why these types of pedagogies are effective and worth whatever effort and challenge we have to do to figure out how to make them work in our classrooms. So this is ultimately the site. I told you the upgrade section is kind of just about the future. So there's a little bit of stuff on here, not a ton, but just a little bit of thinking about inquiry and indwelling autonomy, assessment, advocacy. At the bottom of almost every page, there is a discussion section. I would love for people to engage in the discussion, help each other out, but also let me have a little insight about what you're thinking about, what your problems are. Even if it's like there's a typo on, slide 4 of unit 3, Now, unfortunately, I used Google Groups because I wanted to keep it all in Google. It seemed like it was going to work great. And, but when you view a direct link to my Google site, it is embedded in there and it looks great. If you go to plugandplaychoice.com, it doesn't actually show up there. So what you have to do, if you can join the group, anybody can join the group. It's not restricted or anything, but you have to join in order for it to show up on your groups page. And then you can click on this Google Groups and it will pop up. So all of these different pages, there's a different topic for each section of the site. And so I would just love if people would participate in these discussions and let me know what you're thinking. All right, folks, that's what I have for you. Plugandplaychoice.com. I know there's way more and you probably have lots of questions, but take a look at the site and let me know. I want to be a resource for you. So if you do have thoughts or questions or you just want to talk about it some more, please let me know. I should be able to be engaged in the chat during this session at NAEA. So hopefully I can answer some of those questions sort of in person. Another resource that I have is my personal website. It's artistteachermaker.com. And so I will, any resource, there will be links to this and links to Plug and Play Choice there. There's also links to all my other presentations that I've given and lots of other little random things. So that's another place you might want to check out if you're looking for resources. I was happy to share this with you guys today, and look forward to chatting with you. Y'all have a great day.